Let's continue with our architecture fun. To begin with, we are going to start out with a sheet of paper. Our architecture is done. We need to divide our piece of paper in half. It needs to be shorter than the architecture we have just created. So I measured it a little bit against the buildings, and now I'm taking my pencil and dividing my paper in half. I'm going to start drawing some things that I might see around my cityscape that I've just created. Thinking about the architecture that I've just made, what would make sense to place around it? So far, I have a swing and a lemonade stand. Now, did you see how I flipped my paper over? I flipped my paper over and I'm drawing additional objects like a bench, and I even have a cute little cat here, some bushes, and some flowers. Once I have my drawing on both sides, I'm going to use my Moxie marker to start drawing an outline over all of the drawing that I've just done in my pencil. Now it's time to start painting. I'm going to get my paints out again and activate each of my colors. I'm adding water to this entire pan of colors. Adding the paint, you might notice that I'm going outside of the lines that I've just created. That's okay. I'm going to be cutting out the top half of each of these little scenes that I've created. So if I go outside the lines a little bit, that's okay because I will be cutting those out later on. Once this is 100% dry, we can start cutting it out. Notice that in some of the spots where there is empty space, I painted blue to kind of represent the sky. I might encourage you to do the same. And then look at the edge here. This is going to be fairly easy to cut out. I don't have a lot of crazy little lines or curves. It's going to be pretty simple as I cut this out once it is dry. If you really enjoyed adding texture to our architecture, you might want to go ahead and go an extra step here and add texture onto your painting. So I have painted everything, but I'm using my Moxie marker to just go back and kind of give texture and make it look a little bit better to my eye. Now it's time to cut out these two scenes. I'm going to cut the piece of paper in half. That's going to allow me to work on one scene at a time. Then, when I use my scissors, I'm going to bubble cut, which means I'm not cutting exactly on my lines. I'm cutting around my lines. If it's a nice smooth line like this one, you can cut directly on your line because that's pretty simple. But when we have that tight detail, we want to add a bubble cut first. Now take a look. I'm going to go back and clean up some of those bubbles. So I'll take my scissors, clip it this way, flip my paper, clip it this way. When I move my paper, it allows me to get those tight details. Once you have cut out both scenes, we're going to make these stand up. You're going to use the skills that you learned with the architecture to make these actually stand and become a three-dimensional sculpture. Let's start by flipping over one of these scenes. Now I want to add 3 or more lines on the back. I'm going to add one that kind of comes down from this large building and one here, and then I'll go over to the other side. Now these 3 lines are somewhat towards the middle. I don't have any of them too close to the edge. Now I'm going to fold just like we did with our buildings. Fold back, give a good press, and then fold forward. So I'm doing the opposite every time. Let's do this to both scenes, drawing 3 or more lines and folding back and forth on our piece of paper. Now, both of these stand on our own, just as our architecture did. You can see that it kind of makes a zigzag, just like our buildings. Look at what they look like when they're all together. We have a whole scene inviting our viewers to look even closer into our sculpture of architecture.